It's time to talk Jazz basketball with the CEO of the Utah Jazz and NBA legend, Danny Ainge. With Hans Olsen and Scotty G on 97.5. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Danny, kind enough to join us right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. How are you?
I'm good, Scotty. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Holidays are here. Family's good. Life is good. Can't complain. How's everything in your world?
Yeah, no, I wish I could be on a beach in Hawaii right now.
Yeah, I know, right?
I guess we have to work.
Hey, I know you got to be careful about talking about individual players at the collegiate level, but BYU, big come-from-behind victory last night in Madison Square Garden. You played in one of the more iconic venues in all of sports in Boston, but did you, as a player, did you appreciate some of those different environments like Madison Square Garden or in Boston or some of these places that have so much history? Did that resonate with you as a player at the time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Madison Square Garden was always a fun place. Boston was always my favorite place to play, even when I wasn't playing for the Celtics, but Madison Square Garden was very special. There's so much energy in that building.
By the way, speaking of old buildings, I got to ask you a question. Do you know if you guys actually did turn up the heat in that Laker locker room back in the finals in the old building?
That building was so old, we didn't have any air conditioning or heat in that locker room. We spent the entire winter like freezing. Couldn't even have shoot-arounds at that gym. It was so cold. And then in the summertime, there was no escape. But no, we were dripping sweat every bit as bad as the Lakers were.
I love those old series. Hey, I was talking to I've got a 14-year-old son who's all about sports, and he just loves everything about the sports world. And we were watching Inside the NBA, and they were talking about Charles Barkley, the player. And he looks at me, he's like, that guy played basketball? I'm like, that guy was an incredible basketball player. We're now like 2 generations away from people remembering Charles Barkley, the player. You were a teammate with his in Phoenix, a team that, frankly, if John Paxson doesn't hit that 3, I think you guys win that series in 7 games. But when you look at Charles Barkley, the player, just how good was he?
Oh, wow. I mean, Charles was great. I played 3 years with Charles, and my first year I played with him was the year we lost to the Bulls in the NBA Finals. And Barkley was MVP of the league that year. Mm-hmm. That tells you a little bit with the players that were in there, with like Olajuwon and Jordan were in the prime of their careers. Charles was very special. And, he's about 6'5", and he's got long arms and unbelievable bounce and athleticism. But, yeah, Charles was a great, great player. He didn't, I don't know who I would take between Charles and many other power forwards. And there's a lot of guys that play harder every night that, are more professional in their approach. But like in a big game, in a big moment, Charles was as good as anybody.
There's so much attention now on nutrition and training, and it's a year-long – and not to say back in the 80s and 90s that wasn't a priority, but now the science to it is so immense. Do you see the results of that with today's players opposed to the players back when you played?
Yeah, I think nutrition, obviously exercise and training have been part of it forever, but, things have changed, and there's new products and new studies that show, but there are still players that need to pay more attention to it and be more diligent in what they eat and how they train, as there always have been. But I would say that in today's game, it's more common for players to pay close attention to those instructions and that science.
I do the games for Utah State, as you know, and before games, before practices, they have this little device that kind of hooks into the waistband of their shorts, and it tracks how much they're running, how much speed, their output. The amount of science that goes into this thing is just incredible, and they're judging, playing time and practice schedules kind of based off that information and seeing where you guys are at, and it's just the results of that are just enormous, and that's at the Utah State level. I can't imagine what you've got at the Jazz level.
Yeah, so those things have been around for quite a while. I think that there's some players that don't even like the information because I still think there's a lot of conclusions that are drawn. It's one thing to have that information. Oh, I ran, 3.7 miles today in the course of the game, and the fastest speed I was at was such and such, and my heart rate was this. Okay, but how do you interpret that? If that means, the next game we're only going to play you 27 minutes and you could only run 3 miles, and that's kind of what the game has gone into a little bit, too much. Not everybody does it that way, but I know that there are players that are fearful of that actually happening, and it has happened and does happen where we have some sort of science to say how much a player can do or should do, and that's where the conclusions of some of that evidence that you have is, in my opinion, not conclusive and probably shouldn't be talked about as much as it is.
You drop a game to Oklahoma City, 131-101. Oklahoma City, obviously, they're the defending champs. They're really good. They're a talented roster, but why are they playing as well as they are right now? Because it seems like they've ratcheted up to another level, even above last year.
Yeah, I mean, well, one reason is that they're a very, very talented team. And even with some of the guys that didn't play in the game the other night, obviously Shea, who's an MVP candidate, they're deep. And, they've been winning these games without their second-best player in Jalen Williams, and all of a sudden he's back playing now, and so it's not as dramatic to not have Shea not playing. But they're a deep team. They're well-coached. They're young. They're fresh. They got a lot going well for them.
23-1 to start the season. When you saw Shea come out of the draft, going into the draft, did you see this to a certain extent, or has even this surprised you, the level he's reached?
No, it's surprising. I mean, when anybody becomes the top player in the game, I'm not sure you ever see that when they're really, really young. But I did see, I would say 5 years ago, where I thought Shea had a chance to be this good. But I did not see it through the draft process, his 1 year at Kentucky.
When it appears the Chris Paul era has come to an end, where do you put Chris Paul in? And I'm not asking you to rank him, but do you put him in the upper echelon of greatest point guards, or is he just outside that group?
I think he's in the group. I think he's a very, very special player. Chris, I remember the first time I saw Chris, I was watching him play a game at Duke and Wake Forest his freshman year, and he didn't have a good game. His shooting numbers were not good. I walked away from that game and go, I got to get that guy. That guy, somehow, some way, I'd love to get him with the Boston Celtics at that time, and we did everything we could to try to get Chris in that draft, and we couldn't find a way. But, I've always thought he was special. He has a special mind for the game. He's got a clutch gene. Unfortunately, his teams haven't won yet, and that's, but there's a lot of great players that that don't have a chance to play with some of the better teams of all time. But, I think it would be hard to actually rank because I think we put a lot into team success, and he did have a lot of team success. He just never won one, and it's not because he wasn't good. That's for sure. He's a great player.
Danny Ainge, kind enough to join us right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Will Hardy is begging and pleading for his guys to continue to play hard. It's a young team. When you talk about a team playing hard, obviously they're crazy talented players, but are some guys just kind of born with that genetic to be able to give that extra gear, or is that something that you can learn throughout the course of your career?
Well, I would say this. I would say that with every player on our team right now, if you just look back at them when they were starting in their first years, second years, which we have quite a few of them, every single one of them all the way up to Nurkic and Lowry. Like those guys are all playing harder. Everybody's playing harder than they did when they were young. So yeah, I do think there are some young guys that are just born to play really hard all the time. And usually those guys aren't the best players and aren't the best shooters and all that, but those guys are valuable. But I feel like all our guys are playing harder, but it doesn't mean that you don't revert back. And I still think oftentimes when players aren't playing hard, it's not as simple as just turning on your motor. I think confidence plays a huge, huge role into that. How you're feeling about yourself, how you're feeling about the role, like where you're supposed to be, how much knowledge you have of your opponent. I think experience, all those things enhance how hard someone plays. And so sometimes when guys aren't playing hard, they're not playing hard enough. They're not committed to playing hard. But I think that's more rare than it is. I think that, especially with a young team like ours, I think it just is a little bit of confidence lacking, understanding exactly their role all the time. And I'm not sure that, but you have to find a way. Listen, you've got to prove to your teammates and your coach that you're needed. And I think that's, Will's motivation with this young group is like, no matter what, you have to play hard. Which I think is right. And like I just said, I think that since Will's been coaching this group, I think every single guy of all the young players that we have on that team are playing harder.
When you're on a team, you talk about confidence. When you're on a team that's maybe not ratcheting up the amount of wins that they would hope for, how do you find ways to increase confidence? Yeah,
that's a tough one. Like you said, the BYU game last night in New York City, how do you stop that run? They scored 21 in a row against BYU and took a huge lead, and BYU couldn't make a shot. That wasn't because they weren't trying hard enough. That was because they just didn't have a feel, or collectively they didn't know how to stop the bleeding and, get confidence in making the shots and find ways to get stops. And I think that they found it in the second half, and that happens all the time. And as you see with the Jazz, like we've had, I think we've only had 3 or 4 really bad games where, it was really bad the first quarter and a half, 40-15 or something and like that. And I think that that's what I mean. It's not so much they're not trying. It's like it looks like they're not trying because they're not playing with that swagger. And then sometimes the opposite happens is where, players are trying to do it individually. And because they're being selfish, but because they're trying to help the team win. And by being aggressive, they think is the best way. And then turnovers happen, and sometimes it gets worse. But yeah, that's why coaches get paid the big bucks. Well, I'm very, very sympathetic to coaches. There's no simple science where we can put a strap around their waist and tell them what's wrong with their heads.
When you're putting a team together, whether it's draft or free agency, how much do you look at how that individual would fit into a locker room that you currently have in terms of getting along, not being a guy that would cause issues, or, how much of that conversation goes on into how much of a fit would he be culturally with your organization?
Yeah, no, that's a big factor. I'm not sure it's a determining factor, because the reason it's not is there's rarely someone that I've identified in the last years that would be such a disruption that you wouldn't want him. Occasionally there's a guy that's not a fit. He's probably not a fit with most teams. But when you're drafting guys at such a young age, most of the kids are still really good kids.
There's a final question, just this confidence and development of players and what you have and what can be developed. I've asked a lot of football coaches this, but I'm curious about it on the basketball side. Can you learn to be tough? Or is that something that, I mean, we talk about play hard, but just toughness, mental toughness, physical toughness, can you learn that, or is that something you're born with?
Yeah, so it's both. Okay, so I don't think it's that simple. I think that just as I said earlier about the guys playing harder, they do get tougher. They are able to play with more injuries, more pain. They do compete harder against guys that are more physical than them, and they learn to become tougher. But there are some players that are just innately tough, and there's others that have been raised by big brothers and tough environments, and they've had to learn toughness in their young life, and they've learned it before they get there. But I do believe it's something that can be taught. But when you take a look at a guy like John Stockton or Larry Bird or Michael Jordan as examples, like those guys were innately tough. They were always tough. And that's that. If you got guys that are that tough, those are the kind of guys you would like, especially with that much talent.
Danny, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it, and look forward to catching up with you next week. Great insight as always. I can't tell you how much we enjoy these conversations.
But you don't get to go to Hawaii right now?
No.
Next week?
No.
Yep.
I was in Tampa last week for a basketball game, and it's not quite Hawaii, but it was a lot better than what we have here, that's for sure.
And how are our Aggies doing so far this year?
You know what? They're 8-1. And they did lose to a team in Florida, South Florida. I think that there's still a lot to be learned about them in terms of toughness, in terms of dealing with adversity. They've got a lot of talent on the team, but it'll be interesting to see when they get in the middle of the Mountain West how they handle adversity, and when people learn how to handle that matchup zone that they run that gives a lot of teams fits if you don't see it regularly. So I don't know. I think we're in a really good place in state. Obviously, BYU's playing really well, and they're loaded with talent. I think Utah State has a chance to be an NCAA tournament team as well.
Oh, great. Well, it'd be fun. I've noticed their record, and I noticed their game in the tournament during the holidays, but I'm anxious to pay a little more attention right now as they get started into conference schedule.
Love it.
It'll be fun.
Well, I appreciate it, Danny. Thanks so much.
All right. Talk to you later, Scott.
You got it. Danny Ainge, CEO of the Utah Jazz, right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Man, every week you learn a little bit more. And I'm not going to lie, selfishly, because I grew up watching basketball in the 80s and 90s as a kid, and that's my era of fandom of the NBA. That's when I fell in love with the sport. So I'm not going to lie, from a selfish standpoint, and I think there's a lot of people of my generation that listen to this show, I am going to take him down memory lane every now and then. And, that's going to happen. So just be prepared for it. But great insight, as always, Danny Ainge. Coming up next, what you may have missed right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.